Hello and welcome to a special Friday edition of the Corner 3 here on Pittsburgh Sports Live. We're in the Beaver County Auto Studios as always. Not flying solo today. I'm glad to be joined once again by Mike Asti. Mike, first things first, I'm glad to have you back.
I'm glad to be back. I don't know if people would agree, but I'm glad that you're glad to have me back. And yeah, you did a good job on the solo shows, though, I will say.
Hey, I appreciate it.
It's tougher than you would think. Yeah.
You know me, though, I'm an extrovert and I prefer someone to talk to.
Okay. I'm happy to provide that. Yes.
Exactly.
I like to think I'm easy to talk to.
Well, big show today. First things first, we're going to preview the Final Four. The games happen on Saturday and what we think the results are going to be. And, you know, the game on Monday as well, the national championship game. It's all led up to this, the big weekend in the college hoops. Then we're going to talk about some of the recent Pitt transfers in Malik Ellison and Cameron Davis that have left the program over the last week here. Haven't talked some Pitt hoops in a while since the season ended. And then I have kind of a surprise little...
I'm not even aware of this right now.
Yeah.
I'm not even aware. You wouldn't
just
even tell me.
a little question I'm going to pose to you, and I want to get your thoughts, and I'm certainly going to share mine because two ridiculous things that have happened over the past week. Maybe that's a little bit of a tease there, but
okay. There's a lot of ridiculous things that have happened.
Well, there's always ridiculous things, especially in hoops.
That still could be vague, yeah.
But we'll talk about that later. But first things first. Want to talk about the Final Four here. Games coming up on Saturday. First one is obviously it's going to be Virginia and Auburn, the 1 seed Virginia and the 5 seed Auburn. Virginia avenging that loss in the first round last year to UMBC. They got a scare from Gardner-Webb, but sure enough they've seemed to sure things up and they've gotten to this point to the Final Four. The first for head coach Tony Bennett going up against Auburn with Bruce Pearl and a team that was in the consistently ranked all season and was coming out as a 5 seed that nearly were upset by New Mexico State. An upset that I had picked in my bracket.
Oh, okay.
A New Mexico State team that
your bracket is busted.
Oh, it's far from busted. It's on fire.
Okay.
But
a dumpster somewhere.
Yeah, it actually is. It is a dumpster fire.
Okay.
But they were a team that narrowly escaped New Mexico State, and they made it all the way here to the Final Four. Knocking off Kentucky and everyone, North Carolina as well. So this first game here, I mean, this is, I feel like, kind of a clash of styles in a sense, where it's Virginia, a team that wants to slow things down, lock in defensively, and keep the pace of that game like as slow as they possibly can.
Right.
Okay, and a team that also doesn't turn the basketball over, that is just going to be really, I guess, safe's not the word, but they're going to try and be pretty conservative.
You don't want to call them boring, but it almost is a little college basketball boring.
Yeah.
You could argue San Antonio Spurs early 2000s.
Yeah,
winning a lot, but it's going to be boring.
Yeah, they're boring. Going up against Auburn with the fiery Bruce Pearl and...
the opposite, yes.
Yeah,
not boring at all.
Exactly, and the dynamic duo of Harper and Bryce Brown, the two guards who combined for 50 points in their Elite Eight game to get them over North Carolina. They're more of a team that wants to run and gun. They want to shoot a lot of threes.
Right.
They want to get in transition. So it's going to be interesting, I think, to see which of those two styles is able to prevail in this game.
Yeah, it's going to be a contrasting style game, and it's going to be entertaining in terms of for the purist basketball fan in kind of contrasting more of a shooting team, more of an up-tempo team versus more of a defensive team, but also in the sense of which team is hungrier, and that's not as easy as you would figure maybe going into this game where Virginia is more of a program that's been there in terms of been in the NCAA tournament more recently. They're more of an elite program recently. Tony Bennett's brought this team up and emerged then to be one of the top teams of their conference. Not the case for Auburn, who kind of came out of nowhere, and Bruce Pearl gets there and takes them from a program that hadn't really been relevant since Charles Barkley.
It's their first Final Four in program history.
And that includes Charles Barkley, as he's the biggest fan on the national broadcast. Absolutely. With his little desk set up.
He looks like a Mardi Gras float. It looks like a Mardi Gras float.
Yeah, that's basically what's going on. Yeah, he has a Mardi Gras float in front of him.
But it's funny because I'm fine with it, and he's the only guy that can get away with that.
Yeah, he is the only guy. In media, we can never get away with rooting or even talking about our colleges in terms of you never can get away with that as journalists. You can get away with it sometimes as a former player, especially as an distinguished former player.
Yeah.
In media, you're still not supposed to do it, but he can get away with anything he wants because he's Charles Barkley.
Part of the shtick.
It's adding more to this broadcast, honestly.
Yeah.
But anyway, so it's the most successful team in Auburn history, and they haven't been around a while and seemingly coming out of nowhere. But they might not actually be hungrier because this is, as you mentioned, Virginia is avenging after getting upset last year in the first round as the first ever 16 seed to lose to a 1. I honestly thought in my whole life, we've experienced everything in sports. from the Cubs finally winning a World Series after
Yeah.
100-plus years to the Red Sox becoming a dynasty after their curse and everything else in all different leagues. I don't think I ever thought we'd see a 16-1.
Neither did I.
And we see a 16-1. And this success now for Virginia, it only actually more of a testament to how impressive that is for UMBC and how impressive and how much of an upset that was, because many thought Virginia would be a Final Four team last year.
Yeah.
And they get upset to a 16 seed right away. They have that tough game this year in that first round as well before moving on. So Virginia is a team that the only way ever to avenge it is to finally win a national championship. I don't think a Final Four would even do that. And even though it's great for that program and those kids are going to get rings just for going to the Final Four and they can raise a banner, we're never going to... That's a trivia question forever at every college bar forever.
Absolutely.
Who's the first 16 seed to lose 16 seed to beat a one? It's UMBC over Virginia. Even if the next year is a national title, that's still going to be the trivia answer. So they really want to try to avenge that as much as possible by winning these games as much as possible, dominating and making that be as much of an aberration. But Auburn, they're not going to go away quietly. And I think, again, you articulated it well in terms of Auburn's arguably had the toughest road to get here, having to go through North Carolina, having to go through Kentucky. Those are thoroughbred programs always at this time of year. And Auburn gets by. Now, we also can hope that if Auburn would win, that they don't have to vacate this national title at some point in the future of these Final Fours, because I do have a little concern that this is deja vu, and Tennessee was very, very good this year, but didn't get as far as Auburn. But Tennessee was a program that was known for football. They, obviously, women's basketball, but weren't known much for the men's for decades. All of a sudden, Bruce Pearl gets there. They become a Sweet 16 and Elite 8 team. They don't get to a Final Four, but it's the same thing with Auburn now, out of nowhere. So I'm a little nervous. I wouldn't be surprised at all if there's some things that go down.
Yeah, you always got to be concerned with.
We would see. I guess going into this though, I feel like the Auburn magic might finally come to an end. This might be as far as they go. Bruce Pearl's going to be fiery. It's going to be very, very entertaining. He's going to get mad. He might get some lowercase t's in this game. Yeah, there you go.
The most disrespectful thing I've ever seen.
It absolutely is, even to Popovich. But it's going to be entertaining to watch, not just on the court and the styles, but also in terms of the entertainment with Bruce Pearl versus Tony Bennett, who's more of a conservative coach, just like his team, and more boring versus as entertaining as you could kind of want. Yeah. I almost wish we could have Bruce Pearl versus Izzo, and that would be something
awesome.
else. But I think it's the end of the line for Auburn. I think Virginia's defense is going to clamp down. If Auburn gets cold at all in the game, Virginia's going to shoot enough to get enough of a lead, then hang on. They can hang on leads better than anybody in the country. And I think because of what happened last year, really made Virginia realize they got to do it this year. And I think they're going to keep on moving. They're the best team. They should have went further last year. And this is almost a 2-year tournament for them.
I think there's one clear way to beat Virginia, and that we've seen, especially this year, how to nearly beat Virginia, and that's you just got to shoot threes over the top of them. You have to be able to knock down perimeter shots outside of that pack line defense. We saw it from Carson Edwards and Purdue. They were bombing from three and nearly won that game, unfortunately losing it in overtime. But, I mean, he went off for 43 points or whatever it was in that game in the Elite Eight against Virginia. So that is the recipe for success, is to knock down three-point shots. I mean, Gardner-Webb did it too. I mean, every team down the line has knocked down three-point shots against his team, and that's been their vulnerability. But the way, and Auburn's going to shoot a ton of threes, but Auburn is streaky. They have games where they make a ton of them. They have games where they can't.
Once
hit
they get cold, what will the score be? Can Virginia hang on? Will they have a lead?
And they've had those games in this tournament, so you really don't know what you're going to get with Auburn from an offense perspective. The other thing, too, is Auburn is very reliant on getting turnovers and getting in transition and just outrunning the other team. I mean, they made North Carolina look downright lackadaisical, slow, uninterested, with just the lightning quick pace that they were playing with, a complete opposite of what we see from Virginia. The only problem for Auburn, though, is Virginia is one of the best teams at taking care of the basketball in the entire country. I believe they're a top 10 team in limiting turnovers. Mm-hmm. So, if Auburn is able to get turnovers and take the ball from Virginia, I mean, that's going to give them a really great chance to win this game. I just don't know how much faith I have in Auburn to be able to create those opportunities.
If Auburn was full strength, and obviously they lose a player and they're playing for him, if they were full strength, would that change? Would they now become the favorite in this game, regardless of seeding?
No, I don't think so, because I think Virginia is still one of the most talented teams in the country. They have the veteran leadership as well, and they have just veterans and talented players at every phase. I mean, point guard, shooting guard. I mean, Kyle Guy, Ty Jerome. DeAndre Hunter.
Yeah.
I mean, you have Jack Salt as well. So they have just so much experience, and they can give you problems in so many different areas. But I think that is the main thing. If Auburn is able to get turnovers, and if Auburn is able to make them uncomfortable and force Virginia to play out of their comfort zone, to change their style, because they have a tendency to switch up how they're playing, or they have a tendency to stray from their normal game plan, their normal style of play. And when they do that, that's when they're also at their most vulnerable. So if Auburn is able to get in their face, create turnovers, make things difficult for those guards on the perimeter, and knock down three-point shots like a lot of teams have been able to do against Virginia in this tournament, then I think Auburn's got a really good chance to win this game. But if they aren't able to accomplish that, I mean, those are some big things you need to achieve, and have success in those areas. If they're unable to do that, I think Virginia's gonna win this game and end up going to the national championship.
I also think they got to get hot with those threes early. They can't. They can't wait around. They can't expect to come back in the game. If Virginia gets a double-digit lead at the end of the first half, it's probably done unless they go ice cold, because they're going to hit some shots throughout the game. Or Auburn's just going to have to get tons of turnovers to really turn it on. So Virginia getting a lead early in that game could potentially shut the door, and potentially has an opportunity to be the blowout of the weekend.
Exactly. Looking at the second game of the weekend, and that is Texas Tech and Michigan State. Texas Tech, a 3 seed coming in with, I mean, if there's any real like Cinderella, I guess, I mean, even though it's the lowest seed's a 5, I mean, Texas Tech is, I feel like, the team who, although they've been good all year, Texas Tech's a team that over the last 2 seasons has kind of come out of nowhere over the last 2 years and established themselves as one of the best programs in the Big 12 over the last 2 years and the country. They've been on an absolute tear.
It's their first Final Four as well.
They
didn't get there with Bob Knight. The same thing as Auburn. This is a
So they've been on an absolute tear. They're one of the best defensive teams in the entire country. I mean, they locked down Gonzaga, which I believe was the best offensive team in the country. They locked them down to like 59, 69 points or something, or whatever it was. I mean, they absolutely shut them down. Going up against Michigan State with Tom Izzo, definitely the most experienced and successful coach left in the field, who they probably are, as much as Texas Tech is the best defensive team left, I would say, even with Virginia on the other side of the bracket, I think Michigan State's the toughest team because of their style of play, the coach that they have.
It's Izzo. Every year I feel like we could just say Michigan State's the toughest team in the country and just play the broken record year after year. That's what Izzo wants.
And Michigan State might also have one of, if not the best individual player left in the tournament in Cassius Winston, who has been an absolute star over the last few weeks here. I mean, he's been fantastic. So this is, I think, going to be maybe has potential to be the closer game. And I think I give Texas Tech a really good chance to win this game because of just how well they can play defensively. If they can shut down Cassius Winston, that's going to put a lot of pressure on the supporting cast of Michigan State and on Tom Izzo to figure something out to score on this team, because that is no easy task. And they've also are a team that's finally started to get their offense flowing. They're not one-dimensional like they maybe were for parts of this season. They're now a team that can outscore you and also lock you down defensively. And I think that's kind of the worst possible situation for Michigan State. A team that I think, I'm worried that they played their best game of the season against Duke and were able to escape by 1 point. I mean, Duke going in on paper probably the best team in the country. I mean, they were the number one.
It makes sense. You got to give your best effort against Duke, though.
My worry is that they played a masterclass game, a great performance in that game, and I think they're just going to have to top that, and I'm not sure that they're going to be able to exceed the performance they put on against Duke.
Yeah, the only advantage Michigan State would have, and this is the Izzo factor, and this is how, despite starting the NCAA tournament with tons of criticism on how I was maybe yelling at players a bit too much for some, not for me, but he proves himself throughout every March Madness for the most part, where he ends up at the end of the madness of March, opens with criticism. It usually concludes with him in the Final Four, and it's happened 8 times now in the last 20 years, winning 1 national title in the year 2000, 7 more Final Fours since, and those include years where he was a 5, a 6 seed. This is a pretty kind of quiet high seed for Michigan State. They were under the radar most of the year, kind of quiet in the Big Ten, but they still got respectable in terms of where they were as a seed. They have maybe the best player left in the tournament, which usually is a major deal, which usually is why many would have thought Zion Williamson, if he got through Michigan State, would have walked through the national championship because he single-handedly could have dominated games, and many would have expected that why they picked Duke to win the national title going into the NCAA tournament. But Izzo's teams are going to be tough. The issue, and the only advantage they may have, the issue for Texas Tech could be, is inexperience.
Yeah.
It could be the Auburn factor in terms of this is a school, a athletic program that maybe is known more for football. That if you talk about college basketball, you talk about Bob Knight briefly. You don't really talk about any other level of success in the last several decades, if not even beyond that. It's their first ever Final Four,
Yeah.
and they've been building this for a couple years. It's not like Auburn kind of out of nowhere, but I would imagine the casual fan probably isn't aware of that. They were relatively quiet in the building last year. They didn't go as far as they maybe would have liked, and is a team that has never played in this moment before, a coach who's not experienced doing this, like Bruce Pearl, who's veteran but hasn't been to the Final Four, versus a guy who certainly for what's left, but even in the overall field, is just as experienced as anybody else. And when you talk about the hunger or pressure factor, Tom Izzo has said something this year going into this Final Four that he has not said in 20 years. He's won the one national title 20 years ago, and he actually said going into this Final Four to the media, he now feels pressure and feels like to legitimize himself into the elite coaches, not only of his era, but of all time, he needs to win another national championship or at least get there another time, only getting to the final game as a runner-up once after that one national title 20 years ago. I don't think he needs to prove anything because he's taking a team without number one recruit. This is not what Coach Cale and Coach K are getting. And Coach Cale has won national title with NBA draft picks and number one overall picks throughout every year. That's not what Michigan State's getting.
Yeah.
But that's what he feels. So maybe that adds some oomph in him. Maybe that adds something he can administer to his team. I don't know. I'm rooting for the guy, honestly. I'm going to say that. I'm rooting for Izzo right now. I'm going to put my little banner here in front of the table. I didn't go to Michigan State, but I'm going to root for him. I think Texas Tech, though, is probably going to take it.
What I find really interesting is I think three of these teams have something really impactful, powerful that is driving them, or they have some significant thing that is motivating them.
Yeah, an injury
Michigan State, it is, we need to prove that this coaching style that everyone was lambasting and all PO'd about before the tournament, at the start of the tournament, we need to prove this works and stick it to everyone.
Right.
You look at Virginia, it's obviously avenging that loss to UMBC, the 16 seed last year.
Yeah, the people out there that criticize Izzo, they provided them the Bulletin Board material.
Exactly.
Without that, they might not have anything.
And for Auburn, obviously playing for their injured teammate, Chuma Okeke, who tore his ACL in the Sweet 16. So the only team that I feel like doesn't have a singular
Texas Tech,
big thing there that is motivating them is Texas Tech. And I'm not going to say that that's a knock on Texas Tech or that's going to hurt them.
No.
But there is an element in sports of having that common goal, something to play for that drives a team and pushes them to their greatest possible potential. And I still think Texas Tech is a fantastic team.
Right.
And I think that they're going to do a great job defensively on Michigan State and give them a lot of problems. But maybe that's something to look at, is just that, you know, these three other teams that are in there, they all have this driving force, this singular goal in addition to their one goal of winning a national championship.
That's what I was going to say.
But
it's kind of tough to say a team's not motivated when it's their first ever Final Four,
of course.
first ever national championship. I mean, that got to be enough right there. And the funny thing is, you could argue, and maybe, quickly, you think this was coach speak? Do you feel that Izzo really thinks he needs legitimize? He's already a Hall of Famer. He's already 8 Final Fours is insane. I'd imagine that if he doesn't win another one and anybody would criticize him, he would say, well, Cal didn't win, Chaney never won a national title, Huggins never won a national title, you got to be kidding me with my recruits. So I think he knows all that, and he's a fiery guy that's not afraid to say it.
I don't think he cares.
I think he might be making those comments maybe to provide the motivation to what you're saying. Maybe he wants to add more fuel to the fire because his players, including the one that he yelled at, defended him and said that, we know that we're held to a certain level of accountability. Our parents knew that when we went here. We wanted to play for this guy. We believe in him. It's nothing crazy like you guys are saying.
Yeah.
They rallied around him when he was getting criticized. So maybe this is more of that. Maybe it's just coach speak to try to give them an edge because maybe he realizes basketball-wise they don't have the advantage. It's going to be interesting. This is a weird Final Four weekend. We've been so blessed the last few years.
I know.
Really, even a decade plus going to George Mason, etc., with VCU, with these out-of-nowhere true Cinderellas from mid-majors going to Final Fours, that we get these teams. But honestly, if you're an underdog fan and you want to root for an underdog, there are multiple teams here with their first ever Final Four.
You're right.
There's an injured player to root for.
I think the one thing coming into this is I think this Final Four is. I think it will still be an entertaining, competitive Final Four. I think there's no question that it will be fun. I think, though, that if you're from the perspective of the NCAA, this is maybe the worst possible scenario for a Final Four.
You wanted Zion.
Well, because you don't have Zion
you
and Duke.
wanted Duke
well,
there,
that's the one
sure.
part. You don't have Zion and Duke. You don't have that star power, that player that you only have for a year that you want to market as much as you can. Mm-hmm. You want to suck as much marketing and publicity out of him without compensating him for it and for 1 year as you can. But in addition, you also have pretty much all chalk. And I know that there's two teams making their first Final Four ever, but Texas Tech was still a 3 seed. Auburn was still a 5 seed. And these are still, they're still fairly large athletic programs.
You can't be
college.
Shocked about
Izzo,
even Bruce Pearl finally getting there.
There's no clear, like Cinderella. There's no Loyola Chicago. There's no George Mason, like you said. There's no VCU. So you either are going to have the star power or you're going to have the Cinderella story, the double-digit seed or whatever it is, or you have both. The NCAA has neither of that, and even though they have one iconic coach, at least, in Izzo, and two teams making their first Final Four, I still think that it's kind of worst possible case scenario.
They might also be afraid of Bruce Pearl and having to worry about a scandal in 2 years
that's
too. If you're in the NCAA boardroom and you're a CEO and you're sitting back there in your heart of hearts, you're probably rooting against this Auburn situation because you're just terrified. You don't have to be dealing with that every single year. And we're going to remember the national title if they would win. I'm going to remember this Final Four like I remember the Fab Five Final Fours. It'll be a sweet 30 for 30 one day, I'm sure.
Louisville with Russ Smith and Peyton Siva won a national title.
Yeah, I mean, I saw it. It happened. But so, I mean, we're going to still remember it, but they're going to do they're not going to let the banner be up there. And for some programs, it's not a big deal, but it would suck for an Auburn program that doesn't have another Final Four, that has obviously the Cam Newton football national title, but doesn't have one in basketball. So if they would take that away and not let them celebrate, not let them have the reunions, not let them have the banner, they might never get one again.
Well, also the tarnished view of the Cam Newton football title as well.
There it is. It's there. Yeah, so again, that would suck for the program. That's already what they just dealt with Cam Newton in that national title, even if it's not officially vacated. So, yeah, that is an issue. I mean, you could make an argument that because you have this Final Four the way it is, without a true Cinderella, with teams that are normally good, but some out of nowhere, first Final Four is Izzo being there yet again, that it does allow an argument for the Coach Cale in Kentucky with the one-and-dones yet again, 4 Final Fours, 1 national title since the one-and-done rule, and he got there at UK. Roy Williams, we know the success at North Carolina, but they were a heavy favorite. Zion Williamson at Duke and Coach K's pedigree, but this is maybe the best player he's ever had in terms of an NBA product, and that is an actual serious statement, as crazy as that sounds.
Yeah.
And the fact that R.J. Barrett was there and how stacked that team is, and maybe was more of a loaded team that he had in recent years at Duke, that this is maybe a year where those programs, especially Duke, could sit there and reflect years from now and even now and say, this is a missed opportunity, that this was a missed national title chance, this was a missed, not even get a Final Four out of that Zion Williamson experiment is catastrophic, because I remember actually I was here as your co-host on the first Corner 3, I believe, and you dropped one of the bomb, and you dropped the bomb that if Duke didn't go undefeated, you would maybe call it a disappointing year. That was before they lost the game.
Yeah.
They ended up losing several.
One of my hot takes.
It was a hot take from Cale, but they didn't even get to a Final Four.
Yeah.
And I don't want to underrate that it's incredibly tough to get to a Final Four. There are Hall of Fame coaches that never got there. There are Hall of Fame coaches that only got there a few times. It's hard. That's why you celebrate a regional championship in college basketball, and no other sport would you. Yeah. A Final Four, you wear a ring, you have a banner. In every sport, I would think it's ridiculous. I would never want to celebrate just being near the championship. Yeah. But in college basketball, that is a big deal.
Absolutely.
And that's a big deal for example, we'll get there in a moment, about Pitt here in Pittsburgh not having had that success in their run and having rivals like WVU and et cetera get there. Just that one extra step to a Final Four is a major deal. So maybe that's some of these programs can look back on and be like, well, we missed it.
But I have Virginia and Texas Tech going to the national championship. You have Virginia, Michigan State.
Well, I don't want to give this. I was going to go Texas Tech and Virginia based on what I saw here. Just to be different than you, and because I'm going to go root for Izzo here, admittedly, I'll go Virginia and Michigan State.
I think in the championship game Monday night, I think it's going to end up being Virginia. I like the story of being Virginia, at the lowest of lows all the way to the highest of highs. That turnaround is going to be for a great 30 for 30.
I think this is Virginia too.
Yeah, but I think Virginia has just. They're so motivated. They have so much talent on that team. A great coach in Tony Bennett that I think it's about time he got here to this Final Four and really solidify his place as one of the best coaches in the country right now.
Sad but say they don't have a name player there. To be honest, in 20 years, you might remember the upset lost more than the title.
Absolutely, yeah. But
funny.
Regardless, though, I do think it'll be Virginia and Texas Tech, and I think Virginia will get the victory.
Okay, Virginia's gonna. I also have Virginia winning regardless of who they play.
I originally had Duke and Tennessee, but we know how that
goes. I had Duke initially as well.
But some Pitt recruiting news, or I guess it is recruiting news, but also just news of the current team that came out over the week. Guards Cam Davis and Malik Ellison both deciding to leave the program, transferring away. Malik Ellison, originally the transfer from St. John's. He's the son of Purvis Ellison also. So the junior from Voorhees, New Jersey, deciding to leave the program. Was a guy that really wasn't much in, I guess, the future plans, or wasn't. He was in and out of the rotation over the season. He was averaging like 5 points a game or something along those lines. A good defender and a decent rebounder for his size as well. So I think they're going to miss the defensive presence he had, but really never got it going offensively. And the other guy that transferred from the program as well, Cam Davis, also not much of an offensive guy, but certainly a really good perimeter defender, maybe one of the best perimeter defenders they've had over the last 2 years under the last year of Stallings and the first year of Cale. Both of those guys deciding to part ways and leave the program. I think a lot of people are looking at this as, that's fine, that's additional scholarships for Cale. Yes, that's great, and it's just another step and another building block in the path towards building the Jeff Cale version of Pitt that we ultimately they want to get to.
Which he hasn't been able to do yet. This is now the opportunity.
Yes, but I do think that, be careful what you wish for, because as much as these guys are still byproducts of the Stallings era and maybe weren't getting that much playtime, weren't huge contributors, I think they were still fantastic locker room guys. Malik Ellison was captain last year for the team. Cam Davis, all around loved by everybody.
Yeah, you mentioned being around
in the media, in the locker room. Yeah. I mean, there has been in my time covering the team since Cam Davis has been there over the last 2 years. I mean, there's been no one who's been more energetic, beloved by everyone, and just always willing to talk, always has a smile on his face. So. Always been a pleasure, and I know that Alan as well can attest to that also. Covering Cam Davis has been a joy, but I think that this is something that shouldn't be celebrated the way a lot of Pitt fans are celebrating, because I think these two guys, like I talked about, are really good perimeter defenders and just giving you depth and experience in a team that's going to have a lot of freshmen and sophomores over the next few years. If you hold on to these guys, you have additional defenders you can throw out when you're playing, a team that is inevitably going to have the great wing players like Dukes or Virginias or UNCs over the next few years. It's important to have those guys that are good defenders and good leaders. And I think that we can't undersell how important it is and how much of a loss it is to have those guys leave the program, because even though they maybe weren't putting up the statistical numbers that you can see, they were certainly great guys in terms of leadership and honestly just defensively as being good perimeter defenders. So I think these are losses for Pitt. And as much as they open up additional scholarship spots on the roster, I think they're definitely going to be missed on the court as well as off the court.
Well, you just look at what we just got finished talking about in terms of this NCAA tournament and this Final Four. There are two ways usually you get through a college basketball season with success. You get through your conference, you get through an NCAA tournament, and have a deep run. Usually it's either having a lot of NBA prospects and having top recruits and having a Zion Williamson type of player and being an elite program that can just stuff those players at you, or having experienced players. When the other programs win, is usually because of experience. It's Virginia now after a year of the upset. It's Michigan State doing it forever under Izzo. It's what's happening even at Auburn out of nowhere and Texas Tech that's been building up to this. It's off of experience. So now Pitt, they're not going to get a Zion Williamson, those type of players. So you'd love to have as much experience as possible. And a lot of fans may not get what you're saying in terms of their leadership and locker room and what maybe the media would see by being around the team so often. They're just going to look at the box score or scrolling through on their phone or watching the game, not see much production. But those players certainly cannot be undervalued in a college basketball season when you really need to seize the day and get your opportunity when it's there, and that experience can really help the team. I mean, it was a Pitt team that maybe some argued the inexperience overall, especially on the starting five, is what caused them to decline and dip from a hot start to not even be having a postseason.
Yep.
So that's going to be gone now. And it's going to be more of the case. I am excited, though, to see, for Pitt fans, what Capel will do in recruiting. It seems like there's a lot of positivity on the first year, even though it didn't result in a postseason, even though you had the 12-game losing streak. There was a lot more competitiveness in him with the same team.
Yeah.
So that's coaching on Jeff Capel. And the next step to winning college basketball is off recruiting. And I feel like he's a relatively young guy. He's a Coach K product. He's had success as a player and as a coach. He's already turned the program around from where they were with Kevin Stallings, just off the same team. It's a top 25 media market. You're playing not far from New York. You're in an ACC. You can recruit. He can recruit. I feel like I would be convinced to play there if Jeff Capel walked in my living room. So this is now going to be, the pressure will be on him, and not only this offseason, but next offseason might arguably be more important, where then there's some expectation and pressure, because how many years do you, as a Pitt student and someone who covered the team kind of above the normal fan just there as a Pitt student, how many more years do you think the pulse of the Pitt fan will be to really allow a reasonable sense of expectations on him after? I'd imagine next year they're going to give him another mulligan, maybe hope for an NIT appearance.
I think that is the expectation.
But after next year, I'd imagine that if it's not the NCAA tournament in 2 or 3 years, everyone loves Capel now. That might start souring,
absolutely,
because then that's going to be fully in his recruiting wheelhouse.
No, I would absolutely agree with that. I think next year is another sort of mulligan, but there are higher expectations. The second year of this McGowan's, Tony Johnson trio in their sophomore season, so certainly want to see steps from them. And I think the guys that they're adding, I mean, they have 7 slots in their 2019 recruiting class.
Right.
They already have commitments from Kareem Koulibaly, Justin Champagny, and Gerald Drumgoole. Drumgoole actually the other day was playing in the national semifinals of the high school national championship tournament for La Lumiere School, going up against Bishop Gorman yesterday on ESPN.
Right. You scout that? Did you?
I was checking it out. He had some nice plays down the stretch. They ended up getting the win, so I think they moved on to the semifinal. But they already have those 3 commits. There's some other roster spots there you can fill with grad transfers, and you can fill with a grad transfer and then keep them open for next year for that next recruiting class as well. But yeah, I think that certainly there are going to be higher expectations, still reasonable, but higher expectations is just every year as this Jeff Capel era rolls on.
Right.
But like I talked about initially, you have to have culture guys, and I think those 2 guys are the definition of culture guys.
It's also still players willingly leaving. I mean, yes, it's for basketball reasons, probably.
That's the thing, that's the new era of college basketball, and honestly college sports in general, because we see it in football as well.
True.
It's all about business decision for me.
You can't hate on it for making a decision.
Where is my best opportunity to play? And clearly they weren't getting that at Pitt, and I don't think it's a knock on Capel. I don't think it's a knock on the teammates. I don't think it's a knock on these guys individually. I think it's just the new era is all about where am I going to get playtime? Where am I going to get an opportunity? Right. And some guys are content being a role player and, trying to build this thing up. Other guys, on the other hand, they're only content with getting an opportunity.
Especially in college, because you really do need the opportunity more than, say, a ring or team success. Especially if you want to make money, even if you want to go in Europe somewhere, you need to be able to showcase yourself. But Pitt fans, this is nothing new, and some may roll their eyes and say it's a better guy as the head man of the program, face of the franchise, but you're looking at when Cam Johnson, etc. I mean, they've dealt with players that they wanted to wrap their arms around that would choose to leave.
I think the guys, the difference... It's
a different scenario.
Yeah, the Stallings era was clearly they wanted a better opportunity because the program was going in the toilet with Stallings, for lack of a better
I guess
word.
Many didn't think this would happen to Capel.
The guys that left after Stallings and when Capel was coming in were clearly, okay, we're not in this guy's plans. The guys that decided to leave.
Which can happen.
Yeah, which is reasonable as well. But regardless, my message to Pitt fans, be careful what you wish for, because guys like these, I think, are important if you're trying to build this thing up into what I think Pitt fans and Cale and the athletic department envision it being.
Oh, for sure. The expectations are high, for sure.
Yeah. But my final thing here, I was teasing it early on. I want to get, I guess, both of our takes, but mainly your take. Okay. 2 ridiculous things that happened this week in the basketball world.
Okay.
Number one, I'm going to tease with, I guess, the more recent one. This happened today. The Associated Press named their men's college basketball player of the year. And no surprise, it was Zion Williamson, a landslide vote, receiving 59 of 64 votes.
Okay.
5 people did not vote Zion Williamson, the consensus college basketball player of the year, which I find utterly ridiculous. My other ridiculous...
I mean, it's funny, but yeah.
Source, my other ridiculous thing that I found came out this week. 2-time MVP Steph Curry has been on sort of a shooting slump.
Oh,
I guess you can call it a shooting slump. Shooting 37%, which is not that bad at all ever since the All-Star break. But started to come out of that shooting slump, and they asked, hey, what have you been doing differently? And he said, well, I decided to wear contacts.
Right.
And everyone kind of looked at him like, what? Apparently Steph Curry has just, had blurry vision for his entire life and just never wanted to wear glasses, never wanted to wear contacts, just wasn't into it, and decided over the last month or so at some point to, okay, I'm going to start wearing corrective lenses and throw contacts in, and he's gotten out of this shooting slump. That also in itself is ridiculous. What is the more ridiculous news story from this week? That Steph Curry, his entire career, has been basically shooting without 20/20 vision and been as good as he's been, or the fact that the most dominant college basketball player we've seen maybe in 20 years was not the consensus college basketball player of the year according to the Associated Press.
Okay, by far, and this might be me being jaded as a veteran in media who's experienced people voting, by far the more ridiculous or asinine story that I'd like to use that term is Steph Curry in the blurry vision, apparently his whole career. This is a guy that going back to Davison, going back to a Cinderella NCAA tournament appearance where he was shooting the lights out and emerging with that team, then going into the NBA, and I know that he fell to the 7th overall pick, but moving the Golden State Warrior program and team to different heights, and then the dynasty and every single shooting record in the books, and some calling him the greatest shooter to ever live, and that's happened without perfect vision. In fact, with less than stellar perfect vision. In fact, this man had blurry vision. He was almost blind. If you need contacts. Now, I have perfect vision. I have 20/20. I don't need any contacts. I know I will brush my shoulders off. Clearly, that's not the case for my co-host here. So you may be able to speak on this better. But I will say that if you need contacts, or if you have blurry vision, or even if you're in beer goggles and maybe you're intoxicated and you can't see clearly, everybody knows that what that's like in terms of not being able to see. Imagine then setting every single shooting record imaginable, being a 3-point sniper, being a shooting sensation, beating Reggie Miller records, being this pillar of a dynasty off of shooting and this analytical sensation without that vision. That's just insane. I'm not sure if I believe him, because that just is unbelievable to hear.
You know what? I mean, honestly, I kind of...
I don't know when the vision waned. I'd imagine maybe in college he had it, and maybe the last couple of years he did. Did the vision wane? Was it go towards June? He's had some lesser NBA finals.
No, apparently what he said is he's just always, not had perfect vision. And it's funny because one of the reporters asked him, like, so how long have you had this disease? And he's like, well, I don't have a disease. I just, don't have 20/20 vision like millions of people on the planet.
Yeah, most people don't have it. Not everyone is as lucky as me.
Yeah, obviously, yeah. So, it's not a disease. I just didn't have perfect vision, and you know what? I just never we never got around to getting glasses.
I'm just more efficient as a shooter than anybody who's ever breathed. Yeah.
Which you can kind of believe, because if the form is always the same, you're able to still track the distance, the depth perception, and you keep that consistent form.
I hear you.
You can still make shots, but
not the most efficient ever.
But it is absolutely absurd and ridiculous that he just came out and was like, yeah, I've been doing this incredible shooting performance over my entire career with blurry vision.
It's not even just in games. Before games, he'll sometimes do trick shots, try to amaze
shooting
fans.
From the tunnel.
Shooting in from the tunnel, shooting in from the upper deck, from the concourse.
And
he's making those shots.
I saw a really funny tweet over the week that it's like, wow, like we just already knew that Steph Curry was great, but we just found out that the best shooter in NBA history was just sitting there like, yeah, that looks like the hoop. Like
you're just guessing, you're just squinting.
I think it's
Zion thing is
obviously
before or
ridiculous.
after the shot, would he been able to read a chart? I'm not sure he can tell me how many numbers I'm holding up here.
I don't know.
Is this 3? Because this is the shot he makes. How many points he puts up often?
The Zion thing is ridiculous.
It is ridiculous, but
clearly it has to be the Steph Curry thing, and I've been tossing this around.
I'm going to get anything unanimous is surprising just because somebody's going to be a jerk and not vote for him.
Yeah.
Or something.
So right now, Curry is third all time in 3-point makes in NBA history with 2,470.
Right.
The leader is Ray Allen with 2,973. Steph's obviously going to break that. I don't think it's completely out of the realm of possibility that Steph can end his career with 3,500 made 3-point field goals in his career. I mean, if you look at just his game, I mean, his game's not relying on athleticism. It's completely reliant on that 3-point shot.
I mean, his body dictates that. He had to be a shooter with that body.
Exactly. And, that's the thing. We've seen a lot of guys over their careers change their game and craft their game into being more of an outside shooter when the athleticism goes. Well, you already don't really necessarily have that athleticism. Your game's not predicated on that. Shooting never leaves.
Well, look at Ray Allen, the guy that he's chasing.
Ray Allen is the guy who you just take care of your body, you condition, you eat right, and you can have a career until you're 39, 40 years old, strictly predicated on shooting. It's kind of scary to think that Steph Curry right now can go from being the MVP, being Steph Curry, to, if he plays for another 9 years, at the 9 years from now, 8 years from now, he'll just not be Steph Curry, he'll just be JJ Redick. And I think that's something that's very terrifying.
Yeah, he'll go from Steph Curry to being Ray Allen to then being JJ Redick. That pretty much will be the
shooting never leaves.
Yeah, shooting never leaves.
If he ended up with 30
the totals and the percentages, and it wouldn't be an argument.
If he ended up with 3,500 career made 3-point field goals, I would not be surprised at all. I wouldn't be surprised if he ended up with 4,000.
I want to know how many. Then after that's all over, though, I want somebody out there to give me the percentages with blurry vision, the percentages if they increase. I'd imagine the percentages are going to now increase. It would be interesting if they dip. He is getting older.
It's going to be pre the week of April 5th, 2019, after.
Pre-contacts, after contacts.
Exactly.
Yeah, for Steph Curry. Yeah, that's one of the most asinine stories I've heard in a while, and we've heard a lot of asinine things. But that, I honestly still am not sure if I totally believe it or if there's not an exaggeration to it, regardless of what he said. But that's just insane. And if I was an opponent of his, I'd almost be insulted right now. I mean, you can't block that type of shot, though. You can't guard that.
No, but you know what? It's ridiculous, and you know what? Maybe I will start doing the show with contacts now. I mean, I obviously already wear the glasses, but maybe if I try contact
That's
lenses,
your brand, though. That's
it'd
your
be
look.
even better.
That's your look, though. I don't know.
We'll see. But regardless, that's going to do it for us here today on the Corner 3 on Pittsburgh Sports Live. As always, in the Beaver County Auto Studios. Make sure to click that subscribe button. Helps us out a lot. And follow us on Twitter as well at Pittsburgh Sports Live. Follow me on Twitter, Cale_Berger.
At Mike Asti 11.
Helps us out a lot as well. Keeps that following growing. But
makes it easier for us, too, when you subscribe so we don't have to barrage you with tweets.
Exactly. But once again, that's going to do it for us here today. The Corner 3 on Pittsburgh Sports Live in the Beaver County Auto Studios. We'll be back next week with another edition. See you next week.